Okay, we're reaching that point in the semester where the readings are going to start to become more argumentative essays rather than just describing and informing content. So for the first couple of readings, for example, they would kind of give general introductions and descriptions of philosophy, explain some of the basic subject matter and the subfields, or go over some of the basic principles of logic and critical thinking that are used in philosophy. They often contain arguments, but they're usually often just example arguments, often not having any philosophical content to them themselves, but being used as subject matter to introduce concepts in logic, like arguments or examples of fallacies and so forth. So they were really readings focused on like kind of informing rather than persuading. But now we're reaching the point in the semester where a lot of the readings are going to start to not only inform you about philosophy, but be arguing for and against various philosophical positions. So one of the first readings that I give on this front is by David Kyle Johnson, and it's a nice little article. So I want to give you a heads up about some things to pay attention to in that article, but also a couple of key points to pay attention to when you're reading philosophy generally. So we've got three key things that I usually tell students to focus on. The first one is, what's the author's thesis? In philosophy, when you're reading philosophy and writing philosophy, it's about arguments for and against different positions. So what's the author's main thesis in their article? Two, what's the main argument that is given in support of that thesis? And then a couple of key points or sub-points underneath that main point there. What are the counter arguments and objections that they consider? Who are their interlocutors? What do the interlocutors or the critics say about their position? And then, do they offer some replies to those criticisms, and what are they? And then further, what do you think about those, applying principles of logic to them? And then lastly, why was their argument and thesis important? What work did it do for us, right? And so again, one of the first readings I usually give where we really need to worry about all three of those key points is in this article by Johnson, David Kyle Johnson, on the Colbert Report and Truthiness. So again, it's one of the first articles that is going to have a thesis that is prosecuted throughout the essay, even though Johnson is also introducing some key points along the way. And these are some key points. The other reason that I like to assign this article is because it introduces some further ideas in logic and basic reasoning that we're going to be using all semester. It also engages a couple of popular opinions about philosophy itself. So a few key things to keep in mind here when you're reading through this article. He's going to talk a little bit about the difference between doing philosophy as well as some popular objections to philosophy. In the context of doing that, talking about how to do philosophy, he's going to talk about the principle of charity. He's also going to talk about the idea of a contradiction and the law of non-contradiction. As he goes throughout each of the main sub-arguments in that essay, what he's doing is relying on those principles. And so we're going to be using the idea of the law of non-contradiction all semester long, as well as the principle of charity. He's going to talk about a distinction between intuitionism versus an appeal, what philosophers call an appeal to intuition, so be sure and pay attention to that. And then he's going to talk about relativism, truthiness, and gut thinking. Sometimes people object to philosophy because they think it's just relativistic or a form of truthiness or gut thinking. And Johnson's going to have a particular argument about that point. So be sure and pay attention to that. Also, just these ideas of truthiness, relativism, and gut thinking, they kind of connect or serve as a bridge between some stuff that we've probably already covered, like the notion of an ideologue and dogmatism as being opposed to the philosophical attitude that's reflective and critical and questioning and inquisitive and inquiring. to these ideas we'll cover later in this semester, like epistemic vices or intellectual vices in the epistemology section of the course. So be sure and pay attention to those things as well. You want to come away from this article with at least a basic understanding of these key points, the author's thesis, and the argument that he used to get there. So if you can come into class with those basic things, at least a basic understanding of those key ideas, you'll be in pretty good shape. So with that, go ahead and, if you haven't done so already, take a look at that article, read through it, and study it. See y'all in the next one.